So this is Chamaecyparis, a difficult one to pronounce, Lawsonia, and this is the Elwoodii cultivar. Registered in 1929 by G. Elwood, who was the head gardener at Swanwood Park in the UK. And it was a seedling that I assume he, but let's say they found. So this is a fastigiate columnar conifer, very, very, very commonly available in the UK. And I would have bought this 2 years ago, I suspect. And what I've tried to do is wire these branches to become more horizontal. And you can see, even having done that, they're still fairly horizontal, much more so than they were, but all of the foliage is growing up. So that's just something to bear in mind. So I think what I'll do now is take the wire off just to see what that has done to the bark, and then go from there. It's not looking too bad, but it's still pretty columnar, just a wider cone. The smell from the foliage is awesome. I think that's why I bought it, actually. It reminds me of a little wooded area that was adjacent to where I lived, probably when I was about 8, something like that. I believe now has been developed and is no longer there. But going through those woods, brushing up against the foliage of this tree, it's very fragrant, and so it's evoking that memory. I remember lots of the branches had been cut off the tree, and it seemed to have been turned into a den or something like that by some kids. It's always quite exciting when you find things like that as a child. So this is massively fragrant as I'm doing this. It's amazing. This tree was, when it was originally selected, it was selected as a dwarf, slow growing. But the sources that I've read suggested that since then, as it's been propagated, it's been, I mean, obviously it's not propagated from the original tree now. It's because it's propagated from tip growth. That tip growth is more vigorous, and over time, as it's been, one tree has been cloned, and then tip growth propagated from that, and then new trees have been cloned and propagated from the tip growth on that, and so you've got tip growth after tip growth after tip growth being used, but it's become more vigorous. So that's what's being suggested in the things I've read. Okay, so that's the wire taken off. There's quite a lot of wire on that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of wire on there. And it's quite an interesting branching there. And I suspect that's all new growth from last year. We are always going to have a kind of horizontal, so we're always going to have a vertical growth on this foliage, which is going to be difficult to control. So what I really think therefore needs to be achieved with this is it's going to be a big tree, and really what we need to have is some horizontal branching that then can be allowed some space between the branches that this vertical foliage will grow up into. So I think that's what's going to happen. So let's assume this tree is going to be like up here, And in between now and then, I need to get as much movement into it as possible in the centre trunk. There is hardly any in there at the moment, and need to start spacing out these branches. So I think I'll start doing that now. So down here, we've got two branches fairly close together. One of them will need to go. So let's do this one. I might leave the possibility for some gins, because I've never actually done a gin. Today might be the beginning of that journey. So that one's gone. Then let's get, got two here very close together. So let's take out this one. Then got quite a weak branch here, stronger one here. It looks like we're going to curve this way, so this will be inside the curve. So let's take this one out. And yeah, you can see actually where I've made a cut here. And then this was the leader that's taken over, and that's nice and flexible. Is there anything that needs to come out here? I'll take some out just to make it a bit simpler to interpret. These two are very close to each other, too close. One of them has to go. I think I'll take this. So I've managed to simplify what can be seen here, but I didn't manage to get much movement into this middle trunk. It's more flexible at the top, so it is going to be possible to get something into it. So really tight, there's a scar there from wire where it looks like I've strangled it a bit, but trunk's looking quite gnarled, which is quite good. So what I'm going to do is put this really thick wire on this and then see if I can get some more significant movement into it. Okay, so I'm noticing so I've just put the wire in, but I'm noticing some root problems here. So I'm gonna, as I've taken, you know, probably 60% of the foliage off this tree, I'm gonna repot it, have a look at those roots and see if I can fix them a bit. So I've got this tree out of its pot. It seems to be in this really nice gritty soil, and there's a lot of fine roots there. So it all seems to be pretty healthy. However, we do have a really thick downward growing root there, which I'm not going to touch. And then this is the one that was the worry. And this is the other side. This root all looks great. There's a horizontal one there, which I'll take out. And then back to here. So I'm going to take that out. That one as well. And then that one. And some of these that are not going in the right direction. I'm quite enthused about this tree now, so I have done the root work. There's lots of root in there. I've cut quite a lot of root. I've also trimmed the circumference of the root base as well. I put a little bit of nice Melcourt Silver Grow in the soil. I've raised the planting line so more of the surface root is exposed, and then I've put quite a deep layer of this stone mulch over that to protect it. So in a couple of years' time, we might have a nice situation there with the surface roots if this survives. I was quite aggressive with it, so it could be unhappy about that, but I've taken a lot of foliage off, so the demands on the roots are going to be reduced, so it might just pull through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make these branches horizontal, and I might have a look around there to see if there's something I can wire. So first job is to wire these and maybe tidy up some of the foliage. So I've wired this down, and now what we've got is the branches, the secondary branches are in a vertical state, which we don't want. I'm going to wire them flat into I think that's called a herringbone pattern. Same here. But I'm also, before I do that wiring, I'm going to tip all of this growth, which we don't want it to be so long. So I'm going to tip all of the growth on this branch and this branch. Well, not all of it. Lots of it. It's a bit easier over this side because there's less. Why am I doing this? Because it's getting quite long, and we don't want this plant to get too leggy. So it's about controlling the length of all of the foliage, making it smaller. I mean, it's all going to grow back, but in so doing, it will do some more branching. Okay, that's simplified that bit. So now let's get some wire on there. Okay, so I've done some secondary wiring here to flatten this as much as I can. So now I'm moving up the tree a bit, looking in this area. So I've got this foliage here on the inside of the curve, so I'm just going to cut that off now. Then I've got 3 pieces of foliage in effectively the same branch position. So I've got this little one here, and I've got this bigger one here, and then I've got this back one here. So I'm going to take this little one, well, I could leave that little one out, take this big one. This little one is too close to this, so it's never going to be useful, so let's get rid of it. Then I've got these 2, which one to keep? I think this back one, I don't know. Yeah, I think the back one, take that out, there. All right, so I'm not going to wire anything in this region here. There's some foliage trapped in the wire. So we'll see what happens there. I can pull it out. Yeah, but that's like, the problem is that the branch is indistinguishable from the foliage. So I do want that in the grasp of the wire. Let's put that back. And then it will grow through. So that's fine. Do I want to pull that down now or later? I think later, because it's quite pliable. So all I'm going to do now is just tidy up some of the foliage that's growing out of the stem, out of the trunk. Alright, so that's it. That's all I'm going to do for this tree, which I think has got a really interesting shape now. So we'll see how that goes.